Okay, so we're going to move on from the handbrake into the power position, the load position. You might hear it called the power T, foot strike, things like that. Ultimately, this is going to be the next progression as you move from balance to handbrake and then drive into your load position. I'm not going to focus too much on some of the more what I consider more advanced things. I'm not going to worry about hip loading, about hip positioning, about coil, things like that. I'm going to keep it super basic and try to go through some of the keys of each of these positions, as well as some of the watch outs, and then maybe a few drills. So if we talk about the position of the load position, so when your foot is about to hit, or that foot strike position, I mostly focus on a few key elements, and one of them is what's happening from elbow to elbow. Think about equal and opposite from elbow to elbow. And in this case, I'm thinking about being able to put a baseball bat through my shirt sleeves. And one of the things that I see a lot of in terms of a watch out is not being equal. I see a lot of kids with a lazy front arm, or a front arm going in a different direction. Or I'll see, even though this is equal and opposite, I'll see maybe some elbows that are not really activated all the way, some arms that don't quite go all the way through an arm path. That's number one that I see a lot of. Number two I see a lot of is the stride length. I'll see a lot of kids, especially whether it be when they're throwing a ball or trying to practice this, they'll take a short stride. So one of the things we want to get the kids to work on is getting that full stride length when they're working on their load position. So we've talked about equal and opposite from elbow to elbow, the stride length, and then also the ball positioning. Some of the kids will turn the ball back and cup it, but we want to have that ball somewhere towards third base or shortstop. The drills that I'd recommend for these are generally going to be mirror drills, or just using a camera like this. I know there's some other aspects, like keeping your knees bent, which is a big one for young kids. The other that I see sometimes is again, what's happening with this lead glove. I'm not too concerned about what's happening from elbow to wrist. I'm mostly concerned about what's happening from elbow to elbow. I'm going to go ahead and move on quickly from here. We go balance, handbrake, load, and then we go into the release position. So what are some of the keys of the release position? One of the first things I like to point out is the desire to try to be eyes, shoulders, and hips all level with one another. Now, I'm not too worried about what's actually happening in a throwing motion. If they pull off just a little bit, and we can talk about why, but ideally the target should be eyes, hips, and shoulders level. The other is getting your hand on top of and behind the baseball. One of the watch outs here is for kids who maybe, especially if their hands are small, have a tendency to get around the baseball and throw on the side of it, and you can see that through sideways spin. I like to use four-seam throws to help a kid or a coach diagnose what the rotation is on the ball, see if you've got that good proper backspin. And then as far as a drill is concerned, one of the things I like to do to emphasize the proper release position and the hand position is the towel drill from this release position, pulling straight down onto a towel. The other is, we might talk about when warming up, doing this sideways rocker throws. And we're going to rock back and pull down. Pulling straight down is one of the keys here we want to emphasize with that hand on top of and behind the baseball. The other real big key I like to focus on in this release position is the body angle. With that nice long stride length, we should be able to have a 45-degree angle from the baseball all the way through my arm to my back leg. One of the things that I see a lot of kids and older kids do is they'll be a little bit more vertical, and a lot of times that verticality is created with a shorter stride length. So let's keep an eye on stride length that we addressed in the load section, but then you can really see it on release. Are they coming all the way out? And are they reaching out, or are they letting go up here? We can talk about perceived velocity and making, the more you hold on to the baseball, the closer you get it to home, the faster it gets on the hitter, and the faster the speed feels to the hitter. That will also help you get on top of and behind the baseball if you can reach out front. A lot of good things. So that body angle is a big key. So we said body angle, hand behind the ball. We talked about eyes, hips, and shoulders. I think those are really some of the keys. And then, last but not least, this is another major one, and I should have started with this almost, is what's happening with this lead glove. I see tons and tons of kids who don't control this glove. It goes everywhere and anywhere. And with the day and age of Fortnite and kids playing shooting games and things like that, I try to tell the kids that from their shoulder to their elbow, this is their scope. Wherever this goes, the ball's going to go. So if they pull off to the side, that ball's probably going to go sideways. And if they start yanking that glove, their scope is telling their body that they want to throw the ball that way. So what I try to tell the kids is keep that scope in line. But then what's going to happen? Again, I don't really care if you're an extended arm or if you're a side arm or if you're a tucked arm. What I care about is what's happening shoulder to elbow. And then what happens here is you come into this release position is typically you're going to want to have about palm up and somewhere that glove of the leather of the glove over the leather of the shoe. That's kind of how I was taught. But if we think glove and palm up over my lead foot, that will keep us in line. One of the best pieces of advice I can give any player who's going to want to try to throw more strikes is if you're missing left and right, what's going on with your direction side? And if you split your body into two, your front side, both your leg and your arm, are your direction side. And these things will lead you right towards your target. A lot of times guys tend to get rotational, and this makes it really hard to be repeatable when they land in a specific spot, which in turn will make it harder for them to throw the ball exactly where they want over and over again. So what I would recommend in terms of drills, some release drills. I talked about towel drill to be able to pull down. If you haven't seen that drill, I'll probably put another video up online about that another time. I would take every player through the balance, through the handbrake, through the load, and then through the release. I would have every kid go through these phases and have them check themselves over and over again. This needs to become habit and routine. And then finally, let's move into the finish and the follow through. I'm not going to focus too much on semantics of which one's which. I'm not going to also focus too much on some of them, what I'd consider more advanced things. I know I mentioned I'm not going to worry about hip loading or coiling, not going to worry about shoulder and hip separation in the load phase, not going to worry about scapular loading, things like that. I'm also not going to worry too much right now about throwing on a firm front side. It can be helpful, but I'm truly trying to hit on the basics right now for most players who are trying to clean up their mechanics. We can talk pitching 102 or 103 another time, but for today, when we get to this release point, one of the things that I see a lot of kids do is they'll throw and then they'll just pull this leg in. So as far as the keys are concerned, let's think about the baseball being on the total opposite end of our body from our back foot. And I think of a teeter-totter, I think of equal and opposite. I think of pulling down should pull up my back leg. Okay, if I'm pulling down, okay, I should want to, my leg should naturally want to follow. And again, if your hips are activating and if you're really pulling down with that front side and then pulling down with that arm, that back side should want to come over naturally. Problem I see with the watchouts, I see a lot of times it doesn't naturally want to follow through for a lot of guys. I'm going to set up a whole nother video series on another video on backside issues and some drills to account for it and help you with that. But for today, some of the basics I want to show is what happens in the keys and the watchout. So we go into this release position, right? When I told you we want to pull down and finish up and over. That wasn't a great example, but if we go down, up and over, as my hips are rotating, I see a lot of guys, the watchout is I see collapsing. I see this collapsing leg and they're not activating the back legs. We can talk about causality maybe later, but if we're talking a lot for younger guys who are really collapsing this, I want it to be a watchout. And here's a real simple drill. You might have heard about the bucket drill. And this is not going to fix the problem. It's going to raise awareness to the problem. It's going to let the player have an immediate response to, hey, if I throw a ball and I pull this leg in, and I put a bucket of baseballs right next to my leg, am I going to hit the bucket on my way through? Or am I going to get up and over the bucket? So that's a real easy way to help diagnose if there's a problem. And for some kids and some players, they're not someone who wants to know the whys of everything. They just need to know what to do and what not to do. And so this can be an effective drill to help diagnose. And then for some people, that simple diagnosis can be enough to retrain their body how to do it. There are a few other reasons as to why. One of the things that, again, isn't the cause of the problem, but can be a helpful drill to potentially get a player away from the problem, is extending their stride length. Take a look and see if they were someone who is striding short, it was probably real natural for them to just throw and collapse. The other is you can do, let me grab a chair real quick. The other couple of drills that you can do is you could potentially start a player on the side and then have them throw from here. You can do the same. You can do the same from various positions. You could even have a player start seated and have to drive this way. There's a whole bunch of drills, and I'll probably do an entire video on these at a later date. But for now, I'd say those are some of the keys. Oh, one other thing is on this finish and follow through. One thing I don't want to get too hung up on is the finish position in terms of fielding a baseball. Hey, what do you know? Holding that like an egg. One of the things that I want to focus on is what's happening with the hips. I don't want a kid to be told not to activate the hips. Chances are, if they're finishing, if a right-hander is finishing and they're explosive and they're finishing a bit towards first, I don't want to take away their natural explosiveness and the hip activation that they're getting. I like that. That's harder to teach than getting someone in a good fielding position. So what I really try to impress upon the players is try to get into a good fielding position, and even if you're not perfectly squared up, just be in a good fielding position. Now granted, if you're over rotating, that might be a sign that you're a rotational guy and your front side is yanking you off to the side. But again, in terms of the pros cons of what's a benefit versus a detriment to a player, I do like the explosive rotation on guys. I'd say just have them hit some hard one hoppers right to a player, and if they're over rotating, they should be able to get into a position and start to learn that they need to be at least a little bit more ready to field a ground ball. I hope this is helpful. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and do some more videos specific to the drills for each of these common problems, but for today I think that's I think it's a little bit more than I was expecting. But we've got keys for each of these mechanical checkpoints, we've got some watchouts for each of these mechanical checkpoints, and then I've tried to give you a few drills that I like to do along the way for each of these to either diagnose or reinforce. So if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button, like and subscribe as they say. And then if you want to get notified when more content gets put online, hit the alarm bell and sign up. And then if you have any suggestions or ideas or things that you'd like to hear about, challenge me. I may or may not already be coaching to those specific topics, but if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to have me investigate certain topics for the group, this is a baseball community. We all want to get better, and I'm happy to go through and talk about some of these things if it's helpful for you all. So put your comments down below. Let me know what you'd like to learn about, and have a dialogue, and appreciate you watching. Have a great rest of the season.